What's going on, MMA fans? I'm back to do a video per the request of a lot of people on the subject of Jon Fitch's departure from the UFC. Kind of give my thoughts on what I think of it, of the situation that's going on. It's funny, it's not even a day after the video that I posted up, and not even a day after the video that Carson posted up on the issues with the UFC and the heavyweight rankings, that this latest debacle happens with the UFC. But just to give you a brief background into the situation, Jon Fitch was presented with a merchandising agreement. He was not happy with the language. Some of his managers, I guess, from the American Kickboxing Academy advised him not to sign it, decided not to sign it. Because it's written in the UFC contract that after one loss in the UFC has the right to cut a fighter for whatever reason. The UFC decided, well, you don't want to play ball with us, we're going to cut you. So they cut Jon Fitch. Just real quick to talk about some things that are stated in that merchandising agreement. There's a couple things that are a little bit shaky. And one thing that I'm going to talk about, I'll compare it to an NFL contract, which I actually went over an NFL contract not too long ago in my law class, believe it or not, and I'll touch on something. But the merchandising agreement is set up that the UFC branded material and apparel, anything that's sold and has anything to do with a specific fighter, the fighter can get a cut of up to 30%, excuse me, up to 20% on that. And if it's a third-party royalty coming from other, organizations or stuff, or like sponsors, they can get up to 30%. Now, Zuffa at any time reserves the right that if there is a payout due to the fighter, out of either one of those areas, they can take that payout and transfer it so that it goes to Zuffa instead of the fighter, which I don't agree with. But okay, we'll go ahead and look at the other stuff. The contract has a perpetual existence clause in it that if the fighter gets cut from the UFC, the merchandising agreement continues on even if the fighter's out of the UFC. It runs for 3 years, and at the end of 3 years, the UFC has the option to re-up it. At the end of those 3 years, the option continues, the optioning clause. The fighters get no cuts on DVDs or video games whatsoever. Definitely don't agree with that. And if the fighter is to go outside of the UFC to do autographs, clothing lines, anything like that, they first must receive permission from the UFC. And the UFC has the option and the right to gain up to 70, 80, or 90% of those royalties from that. So the fighter is asked to give up his likeness and his image for pretty much his lifetime, and is tied down to the UFC regardless of wherever they go. Now, some of these clauses in this contract, some of them, they're in there for a reason, and I can understand some of them from the business standpoint. But some of these clauses are just ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. One of which that I'm going to hit on is the clause about if a fighter goes to the outside and does apparel or clothing or anything like that, or anything on the inside, Zuffa has the right to claim up to 70, 80, or 90% of that royalty. The NFL only gets 40 to 30% on their players. And even if they leave the NFL, like I said, I went over an NFL contract not too long ago, and this is asinine. I really just don't agree with it. As it is, fighters, if you see some of these guys when they train, fighters, as it is, are having a very hard time making it. Having to pay for the gym, having to pay Lord knows however many other expenses they have to pay for before a fight, and making 20 to show, 20 to win, to cover your food, your family, your bills, your gym time. I mean, these guys, it's hard as it is. And you've got the UFC, minus what they have to pay on operating expenses and the staff that they have, is making so much money. They're making a large cut. And when this video game comes out, that's coming out from THQ, to sit there and say that the fighters aren't going to get a cut of this is ridiculous. Come on now. Come on. If you see my face right now, it's just, I understand that the UFC is out to be a business, and I think most MMA fans do. But this is, come on, this is a little bit over the line, I think. And I think that to expect someone in the right logical mind to sit there and just go, oh yeah, well, if you're jumping off the bridge, I'll do it too. I mean, this is like telling a fighter to give away their driver's license to somebody. Telling them, you know, the person that's taking the driver's license pretty much tells them, okay, well, we're going to take your driver's license, your identity, you know, and even if you, you know, happen to move on or, you know, you go somewhere else, we're going to keep your identity. We're going to keep, you know, writing bad checks. But, you know, I'm just trying to use that as an example. It's like asking someone to give their identity away and never being able to touch it again. And just have identity for the rest. I mean, that's what I compare it to. I don't agree with it. But like I said, in the unbiased view, and looking at it unbiasedly, there are some reasons why some of these clauses are in there. Not all of them, but some of them. The ones that are, at least in my opinion, the logical clauses. So, end result, after talking about the merchandising agreement, I don't agree with the way that these fighters are being treated right now. There's a lot of guys, and I touched on it in the issues with the UFC video about Joaquin Hansen, Hayato Maha Sakurai. This is another situation where, you know, this is something that could be easily resolved. Instead, the UFC just wants to be greedy and make money. Money, instead of maybe promoting some of these guys that have put their time in. And my biggest thing is the UFC does not make the fighter. The fighter makes the UFC. The whole reason that me, you, everybody watches the UFC, everybody watches MMA, is the fighters. They're the ones that bust their butts, man, and put their lives on the line in those cages and in those rings. And to treat them like this, I'm not asking them to be paid, you know, like A-Rod. I don't think any MMA enthusiast asks them to be paid millions. We don't want to see the corruption of boxing. I know I don't. But they need to be compensated a little bit more better than this, and treated in contracts a little bit more better than this. So, those are my opinions on this subject. Leave me some comments, constructive, negative, positive. You know, I know you won't agree. Not everyone will agree with how I looked at this. Some will, some won't. So, as always, like I just said, leave comments, constructive, negative, positive. And on that note, you guys, have a great day.